son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. We're back here today, and we're joined with Will Ramsey of MyEmoDiaries.
Can you hear me?
I got you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, this is perfect. How you doing today? First of all, how's your day going so far? You're out in Chicago, right?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago. I'm doing really well. I just came from the post office to drop off some books. So.
Oh, nice. That's amazing. So, well, let's just jump right into it. We were already trying to get this conversation going before we started recording here, but you are documenting an era of music that is just there's not a lot of backstage history about the things that went on there. And that's kind of, like 60s and 70s, we don't really hear about the real dirt of those music scenes until the 90s or the early 2000s. So it makes sense that, like, as time passes, more of this shit becomes known and able to be talked about. But first of all, what got you interested in it, and what leads you to being so interested in it that you literally write a book about it?
I was always obsessed with emo. I was a teenager during that time, in the early 2000s when that music came out. And for me, the music just meant so much to me. Like, I was a very isolated, weird teenager. And, as I got older, as time went on, I started realizing, there doesn't seem to be a lot of books, at all about this, what I feel was a very significant time in not only just, rock history, but, kind of just pop culture in general.
Absolutely.
So I was just very confused why there wasn't more written about it or really talked about it. Kind of like you said, you hear a lot about 90s stuff, like grunge and that alternative movement, which I love too. But that's pretty much it. After that, you don't really hear anything about the early 2000s at all.
Yeah, definitely not the inner workings, and just with every little world, there's always little dramas. Everything's like a Game of Thrones, or a high school. I'm sure the Warped Tour, as we hear stories about the bands on the Warped Tour alone, there's all these little dramas and stuff. Where did you do the research though? Because I'm also the person who, if I like a band, I'm gonna scour the internet. I'm gonna read every single possible thing, find every page that mentions them, and just see what I can take away from it.
Where do you find?
Yeah, that's essentially
that's literally what I did. Is that I spent literal months just reading as many interviews as I could, old interviews about bands, watching. Because some of the bands had their own mini documentaries that didn't seem to get very popular, but I found a lot of these old documentaries and just taking notes and just literally just reading as many interviews as possible, watching videos, finding just backstories on certain bands. And then some of it I kind of knew, just kind of being kind of hyperly active at that time. So
yeah, it's just always tripped me out, the bands of that era, especially now we can say in retrospect, they had a profound impact. Maybe people wanted to shit on them when they were being a band, but they had a profound impact, and it's cycling back for sure. As we all grow up and can actually buy things. Now, all the bands want to do reunion tours for that reason, because now we have money to pay for them. But it's just crazy to me that it's really combing through interviews and trying to sift through the shade. Who's pissed at who? What are the inner motivations based on raw interview? That's crazy.
Well, it was that, but it's also because I didn't want the whole book just to be about. I know people are interested in drama, and I totally get that, but I wanted to also talk about the albums that I felt were very important for that era, and why they were important and why they resonated with so many people. So I kind of want to do a balance of, talk about some of the more shady aspects of the culture, but at the same time talk about the albums that really defined an entire generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of the same thing. There's even some elements of like late 90s, early 2000s, like the new metal stuff. A lot of that is kind of cycling back in weird ways.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Even like
time right now.
the idea that Limp Bizkit is on successful tours right now. Like they're touring and they're making money. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But
and a lot of it is Gen Z too. A lot of Gen Z is like really got it,
new crowds. Yeah.
which is so interesting to me.
So I saw a post the other day. You said you had just discovered Deftones.
Yeah, yeah.
No
So,
way.
okay, so like hear me out. So like I was aware of Deftones' existence. I
Sure.
always knew who they were,
Sure.
but it was one of those bands where I was like, oh, one day I'll get to it. I'll check out their catalog, and for whatever reason, I just did not. Until recently, I just kept having people on TikTok mainly tell me, oh, you need to check out the Deftones. You need to check out the Stalls. So it just got to the point where I was like, okay, fine. And I was like, wow, I cannot believe I've waited this long to listen to this band.
Yeah, no, for sure. It trips me out. Deftones, like for me, Deftones was my gateway into emo. Like Deftones is what turned me on to a lot of those emo and like the early metalcore bands. I got into them through the Deftones. But like there's a band. So I love the Deftones, one of my favorite bands. I've seen them more than any other band. I have read every damn thing available on the internet about the Deftones. And they've been a band since the 80s. Like
Wow,
at the very end of the 80s, they started a band called the Deftones, and it wasn't until the mid 90s where they start to get successful. In my opinion, Deftones, in the landscape of not even emo, not even metalcore, not even modern metal or anything, their impact on rock music as a whole was pretty fucking serious. And I feel like they never get the credit for it, even though their shit, you hear Deftones in so many singers. You hear the guitar style in so many guitarists of all these other different like ancillary genres. And even like what Chino and all the side bands he does. I don't know if you've heard Team Sleep. Is that a band you've come across at some point, Team Sleep?
No, I've not.
So that's I'm pretty sure that was a side band with Chino and the drummer from this math rock band called Hella. His name's Zach Hill. It's just very strange. And not metal at all, but I don't know. For me, they were the gateway in, and because I would go see the Deftones, they would bring emo bands out on tour with them.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know that. Like, I'm literally just starting to deep dive into the Deftones. So it's kind of exciting for me because it's been a long time since I could do that.
Whole new territory.
I'm literally learning what you're telling me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But anyways, back to emo. So you said you've been into it since you were a kid. What was your gateway? Like, what were the first bands? What was the record that was like, oh shit, I'm about this now?
It actually wasn't a record. It was watching Dashboard Confessionals, MTV Unplugged. At that time, I didn't even know what it was called. Like, I just knew that for whatever reason, what he was singing resonated with me. And I was just like, what is this type of music? But for me, it was Dashboard Confessional. Like, I feel like they're a band that doesn't get a lot of credit at all.
Yeah.
And I would argue they were very important into kind of making third wave emo more accessible to people. So for me, it was Dashboard, and then after that, I kind of just fell down a rabbit hole. So.
Yeah, Dashboard is definitely a gateway. I remember the first time, because when I was a little younger, I was more just into heavier music, and the first time I heard Dashboard, I hated it. And then I played it. I played it again, and I played it again, and I played it again. I also, at that time, I lived in Nebraska, and in Omaha at that exact same time was Saddle Creek Records and Rilo Kiley and Bright Eyes, and it's more like indie on the more indier side of that. But it was kind of all around me, and I was like resistant to it at first, but Dashboard broke the levee for sure. Then I was like, all right, I'm okay with that.
Because it was interesting. It's like I felt like I think he was just so sincere in the way that he wrote his songs that even if you weren't happy with stuff, there was something. The honesty about it just kind of pulled you in. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I felt the same way. Even with the instrumentation, it's like a lot of bands have to hide behind heavy distortion and big sounds, and he's raw, right behind. He had a band, but it's not. There's not much covering up the sincerity for sure. I feel like you bring up a good point too, because now that I'm thinking of it, I feel like his vocal style ends up influencing that any band that comes after him is kind of like mimicking his vocal style, and that is the predominant rock vocal style.
Yeah. I feel like he gets left out of the conversation a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more like the kind of like more like new wave, like the Gen Z emo fans. I notice they don't really seem to talk about Dashboard a lot. I'm like, maybe they're just like not aware, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is that. I mean, even I remember as a kid trying to find his stuff or like videos of him playing. It was impossible. There was the Unplugged.
Yeah.
There was, YouTube had, it's not what it was, not what it is now. But it's just really funny how it's not that. I feel like he could get the respect. It's like any band could get the respect. It's just like, can you sift through all the shit that exists and find? I don't know. That was always part of it for me too. When I would find a band, I would read the liner notes in their record and see if they mentioned other bands, or try and find the bands that those bands listened to. But
I used to do that with Nirvana. I got into a lot of different bands because of Nirvana. So.
Sure.
Because Kurt would kind of do that. So like I was looking, I was like, oh, who's L7? Who's Flipper? Who's all these different Seattle bands or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So what at what point are you like, I have to write a book about this? At what point are the people around you like, I don't want to hear it anymore? And you're like, okay, that's fine, I'll write a book.
So it is the most random, bizarre story. So I want to say 2022. It was whatever, I don't know if you're familiar with When We Were Young Fest.
I sure
like
am.
Okay, yeah. So me and my best friend, we bought tickets to the very first one. All right, we're like, oh my God, this is going to be an emo's like wet dream. Like that's fucking wild. And so, we first of all, my friend had never been on a plane. It was like his first time ever on a plane, and it took a lot of convincing even to do that. So we get there, the day of the fest arrives. We are pumped. We have like this emo playlist, whatever. We go to breakfast, and as we're eating, we're like, okay, we got to hurry up because the fest is about to start. We get an email like 15 minutes before it's supposed to start that it got canceled. So obviously we're just like, what? We're just like in complete shock. And after being incredibly angry for like 5 hours, my friend said something just randomly, just like, you know what? We love this music so much, and you are kind of obsessed with this music. He said, you should just write a book. And I laughed. And I said, Chris, no one's gonna fucking buy a book simply writing about emo. And then we got back to Chicago, and I just thought about it. And so I put out a video randomly on TikTok, and I was like, I was just talking about what emo meant to me, and I basically said that I'm just gonna write this book about emo. Went to sleep. The next morning, that video had like 100,000 views or something.
Damn.
And I was like, oh shit.
Now I have to write this book.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, let's go. So like you literally just came almost by accident. And then like as I like was preparing to do research, that's when I realized there was not a lot written about this type of music. And I was genuinely shocked. Because to me, emo was like so big, and that was such a
it was also the time. And it was at the time where everyone had cell phones and social media.
Yeah.
Like, it was just at the beginning of all that. There should have been a lot of documentation about it.
Yeah, so that's why I was surprised. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna, because I've been writing like my whole life. So like the writing part I wasn't completely new to that.
Yeah.
But books that I've released previously, they all like epically failed. So like I didn't expect any difference with this, and I was very wrong.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's so funny. Like, I am not blessed with the writing ability. I'm a music person, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like, how many things do you have to do until one of them works? How many things am I gonna have to do until one of these things works? But really, it kind of is just a numbers game. And honestly, social media makes it so easy. Like, even just the fact that you weren't even really gauging the water, but when 100,000 people like that shit, it was like, okay, well, I really should now do this.
Yeah, I was literally just. I mean, that's the first time that had ever happened. So it was just another video. I was just posting just another video like I usually do. And for whatever reason, that one just took off, and it kind of put me on the path that's like beginning to like change my life in new ways. So yeah, it's been kind of crazy.
Well, and do you think part of it's like, I'm not to say that the other things that you've written about you weren't passionate about, but do you think there's something to be said about how passionate you are about emo and how that translates into you writing about it and how that translates to somebody who's reading it?
I think so, because it's like I said, that music, I was a very isolated kid. Like I said, I was very lonely, depressed, suicidal, all of those things. And that music, like,
saved you.
I mean, really, yeah, like quite literally. Like, I know it's so cliche.
No, it's not at all. Like, it's not at all.
It really did. Like, I had nothing else. So, like, and the genre has its flaws, and we can talk about that if you want to. And everything has its flaws. So,
everything has its flaws, yeah.
Yeah, like, we're in this weird place where it's just like, well, if it's not completely pure, then, like, let's throw it away.
Burn it all. Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, burn it all. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, the music meant so much to so many people. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is a strange, with the way that things are under the microscope now. If you put anything under the microscope, you're going to see shit you don't like. That's just, this world isn't filled with things that we all like. That's just not how things work here on this planet.
I mean, I'm actually writing my first graphic novel that's actually like about that. Like, the theme is very much about kind of where we are, and I feel like we're going in a very dangerous direction if we don't slow down. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think about this quite a bit.
Well, it's interesting to see how, like, you analyzing this in a way. Analyzing the history of emo is psychology, like or maybe not even psychology. It's more what's anthropology. You know what I mean? Especially with the impact that this had on now our generation, the generation that will inherit this fucking mess that we have. I've always wondered how we're going to deal with it when we are confronted with those things, and how much, like, 100%, a piece of my personality is Deftones. A piece of my personality is Glassjaw. Like, it's a piece of my personality. I'm right there with you. The music has saved me from going off of so many different type of deep ends. I would be lying if I said it wasn't a piece of me now. It wasn't a piece of who I am, but.
Yeah, and I feel like we do a disservice to ourselves, because, like, started to get a weird rap where it's like you almost had to be embarrassed to like this kind of music.
Right.
Like, oh God, I don't listen to that. I'm like, to me, that's so ridiculous. I'm like, those fans, good music is good music. Whether you like it at 14 or whatever, it's almost irrelevant. It's like, if the songwriting is still good and it actually meant something, why do I need to be ashamed that
it worked?
Like it?
Yeah, it worked. If it said something to you, if it spoke to you, it worked.
It worked.
So when you're scouring the internet, you're trying to find all these different sources. When you're writing something, how involved are you? Are you completely immersed? Are you like shut off the world? I don't want to talk to anybody until I get to the bottom of this. or is it just deep in the zone? Deep in the zone.
Yeah, I'm hardcore. So like, I have a weird schedule. I wake up at 4 a.m. basically every day. Like, so I started that when I started writing this, because that's the only time I could kind of like just really get laser. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would wake up at 4 and I would be writing probably like 5-6 hours or something, just researching, writing, and really just figuring out like the meat of it. Like, what is the most important takeaway from this? Because like, it was very hard to balance, like, because there was so much information. It's hard to balance what did I need to include in the book, and what, while it was interesting, maybe I can, maybe not include that.
And you also edited, like, you didn't have an editor edit your book. You 100%.
No, I added it. Yeah. So,
amazing. Yeah.
Well, that one was interesting because, like, I was a very weird kid. So when I was like 16, 17, I don't know if you remember those books, like the Complete Idiot's Guide.
Of course. Yeah. You read it to editing.
One summer I did. I literally took the entire summer. Because at that time I was like really hard. I would write for like 12. My parents were concerned. I would write for like 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
I was like very hardcore. But yeah, that's what I did. That doesn't mean that I got everything right either. Like, and I realized that going into the second one, or starting with the second one, I'm realizing there's definitely some things I want to do better than I did in this first one.
Yeah, but it's also like that's part of the process, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single record I've worked on where I'm happy with everything about it, And that's like the gift and the curse of doing things creative. You kind of forfeit the right to ever be fully happy with what you're doing. But so how long did it take you to write volume 1? Like from your friends saying you should write a book to you publishing, how long did that take?
It took about, I want to say, maybe like 7 to 8 months, because I had such a strict schedule.
Yeah.
And I was just in a weird position where I had enough money saved where I could kind of just mainly just focus on that. So literally like 6 or 7 months.
And that's like you're completely shut off, zoned in.
Yeah. Like I literally, like I know people get that phrase monk mode. I literally did that. Like I didn't go out with friends. Like I can be a very hardcore person when it comes to trying to finish a project. Because I do music as well. So it's like, even when I was like working on songs or the album, I do the same thing where I just kind of
completely cut off.
Literally,
yeah.
Because otherwise it won't get done. I was hard to get distracted and sleeping on a block in.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I only know creativity within terms of like recording or playing music. It's hard for me to even wrap my head around the amount of reading that you had to do. To like that I know that I've put in comparable work, playing an instrument or doing this or doing that, but it's just hard for me. The writing and releasing of a book to me is an interesting thing. I have a label with one of my buddies, Clint. We do mostly like death metal, heavy metal music from the West Coast. But I enjoy the process of putting together a record, and even if it's not mine, helping somebody put theirs together and put it out there. From your perspective, what was the most difficult part of publishing the book?
You mean like from a technical point? Or
just
like?
at any part of the process, from I'm starting this until I'm holding one in my hand, what was the most frustrating or the most difficult?
Really just figuring out, am I saying too much? Am I not saying enough? And really the editing was the most frustrating part. There were so many things that I wanted to include, but I'm like, I don't know if people would really care. Now in hindsight, I realized like people actually did want me to include even more. So I'm like, okay, I can actually do that next time.
Right.
But it really was just figuring out what was the most essential parts of each of these bands' career. Because I didn't want to do it where I talked about like literally every single little thing. Because like I wanted to be a cohesive story that was more about just like the impact of this music versus just one band.
Right. It's just wild. It's so wild to me. Like I'm just imagining you sitting there, just like Kermit meme, just like wildly typing on there, just like getting all this stuff in there. It's such a cool. I don't know. For me, holding the record or the tape or whatever I created in my hand is a big thing. How big of a win? How did you celebrate when you were like holding the book in your hand? Did you think you were ever going to get there? Was it like a monumentous moment?
Yeah, like it definitely, as you're an artist yourself, so like when you're creating something, it starts off with that initial excitement. And you're like, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. And then as time goes on, it's like, oh my God, am I ever going to? I don't want to look at this thing. Like I don't even want to think about this.
It
like
sucks. I hate it.
It got to the point where it's like, because I would usually like casually just watch different emo bands, like their live concerts or whatever on YouTube. But I was so consumed by it, I was just like, I want to listen to anything but this right now.
Yeah.
It got to that point. But once it was done, it was, I literally like cried because I couldn't believe I got through this. It was very tough because it was a very intense like 7 months. And for me, it was just knowing, like there's two things that kept me going the whole time. The first thing was my partner. Like every morning I would wake up and my partner would leave like little encouraging notes like every day that I woke up. I would find these notes of just like, oh, keep writing, you can do this. And that got me through it. And then my audience on TikTok and on Instagram who kind of just like I would have kids randomly message me just like, oh, I hope the book is going well. I can't wait to get it. That was like, even now, it's just like such an overwhelming feeling that people cared that I was writing something. I'm like, you could probably find someone better, like a better writer than myself. But like it was that encouragement and like that excitement that really got me through it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because you unintentionally became the damn expert. You literally wrote the book.
Yeah, it's been really weird to be honest with you, because like I'm just very passionate about this music and just passionate about alternative culture, because like it's such a huge part of why I am the way that I am. But yeah, it's just funny that this really started out as my friend just kind of casually saying you should write a book about this, to actually doing this, to now me having this conversation with you. Like this is just like kind of it's really surreal.
It's really funny how one thing can spiral wildly out of control.
Yeah, and that's exactly what has happened. Like honestly, the last year or so of my life has been so insane. So I'm genuinely just so grateful to be in a position where I can say I'm literally making a living as a writer, and just
writing about some shit you enjoy.
A child, so
yeah. I think it's super important, just from like the documentation perspective, to have this shit written down, because if someone doesn't write it down, these stories will just disappear. And there's so many interesting stories. Again, like I'm the kind of person, when I read about a band, I want to know everything. I want to find every possible video. And it just always blew my mind that of this era, there weren't more good live videos or just, reasonable interviews of the bands that I wanted to hear in this and other subgenres at that time. So I work in events. I used to do a bunch of events in New York City, but I've kind of scaled that back. But I used to do a ton of events. A lot of the people that I work with here were here during the periods of time when Thursday, Taking Back Sunday, all those bands were on top. So like sometimes I'll get to hear or see like sideways perspectives of that scenario and hear those backstage stories. That's why that's why I was drawn to that work in the first place, is just to kind of see it from behind the curtain. But there's also this thing in that world where you don't talk about what you see. And I feel like that's bullshit, because there's so many good stories. Like there's so much good context that happens behind the curtain that without the proper documentation, it just gets lost and forgotten. But I hope that as the next years go by, and a lot of these guys continue to get older and a little more wiser or whatever, we start to hear more frank discussions of these times, and it's starting to happen.
Oh, definitely. And again, I think emo was just like, or at least third wave emo, it kind of became such a punchline, and I don't know if that's why there wasn't a lot written about it, because
Sure.
there was a book released, I think, in like 2003 that was kind of like about emo and punk, but nothing really after that I found, at least.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe because emo kind of had this, yes, it was very popular, but also kind of was a punchline for the media in a lot of ways. So I don't know if that played a role in why we haven't heard a lot about it.
I mean, I think that's a very reasonable assessment, especially because the people that would have been documenting it would have been slightly older. Like I was the same as you. Those are my teenage years, and the people that would have been writing about it in Rolling Stone and Decibel or any of the magazines that would be covering alternative press, they would be shitting on it. Even Paramore got shit on. It took 20 fucking years for Paramore to get the respect that Paramore deserves.
Yeah, I would say the same thing with My Chem. Same thing. My Chemical Romance was considered
for sure
a joke, and now it's like, oh, they were such an important band. It's like, well, for those of us who really experienced that, we've always thought that. You guys are the ones who are
you're just catching up.
Now.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just catching up. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Paramore took so long for people to take that band seriously. Which is so wild to me. But yeah.
Well, and Haley she got so ruthlessly shit on from so many different angles, but like grade A performer, grade A singer, grade A talent, that she's still relevant today, can still sell out an arena. But people wanted to fucking shit on it because she had dyed hair, and it's because the teens were listening to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Stupid angsty hot topic teens. Fuck you.
Yeah. I talk about that too. It's like, I mean, I feel like it still happens even today, but there's definitely
for sure.
Definitely, it's definitely a thing with like when young women like anything, people try to, or the media tries to undermine it. Where it's like, oh well, young women like this band, so clearly it's not as important.
Right. They're not as talented or whatever,
Exactly, which is crazy because there was a lot of. There's a lot of teenage girls who are into that kind of music, a lot of young women who are into that kind of music. And I do believe, and I talked about that a bit, where it's like, I believe a couple of things about why emo had a lot of backlash. I think a lot of it had to do with misogyny because of the fan base. And even homophobia as well.
Oh, for sure. At that time, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it was... Emo was very ahead of its time when it came to queer representation. Like even if the bands weren't necessarily queer, a lot of the presentation kind of was almost like weak in some ways. It kind of. And I think I really believe those two reasons played a huge role of why it wasn't taken as seriously as it probably should have been.
Yeah, they're just wearing makeup and dyeing their hair and. Yeah. They're the weirdos. Yeah. Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Like gender bending and all this kind of whatever.
Well, but yeah, I mean, to your point, it was ahead of its time in the sense that you're a boy and you want to wear makeup, go ahead. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do that. You want to paint your nails? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, like that was during the time when social media was just starting. So like you have things like MySpace, where it's really like the real first time that kids were able to become like mini celebrities and kind of present themselves the way they wanted to. Like that was, I think a lot of people don't realize just how new that was at that time. Like there was nothing to really compare that to. And, obviously emo scene, music, whatever you want to call it, that played a really important role in the early rise of like MySpace and social media.
But yeah, I mean, it buttered the bread for sure. That was the scene on MySpace. That's the reason MySpace became a global success, is because of scene.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I there was a piece of me. The reason I was always drawn to it is because when I was in middle school, I wanted to dye my hair. I had earrings, stretch my ears, and I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be judged for it. And that was the only group of people that was like, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, and then for me, I felt the same way. It was interesting for me because it's like I was hyperly aware that I'm like, okay, I'm aware that I'm black. I'm aware that like there's not a lot of people who look like me that's in this, and sometimes that's very alienating. But other times, I still felt more like myself within that subculture. I still felt more embraced, I guess, and more welcomed in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it was the first time I was kind of like, oh, I can kind of just be myself, whatever that means, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I can. Here's another thing this music taught me: it's okay to be unhappy. It's okay.
Yep.
It's okay to feel that feeling. It's okay to take your emotions there, just as long as you remember to bring them back. You use the music to take yourself there, and you don't use other things that might be more harmful to take yourself there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, obviously, I think My Chemical Romance is a perfect statement of that. Like, literally, they used to say, we want to be the band that saves your life. And I think it got a lot of bad rap. I think people thought that it was trying to encourage suicide. And, like, it's just doing the opposite for a lot of kids. Like, a lot of us didn't know a lot of us didn't even know what the hell was going on in our heads. Like, a lot of us, we didn't have a way to articulate what we were feeling or making sense that, I had no concept of like what intrusive thoughts were. I was experiencing these negative intrusive thoughts. I was experiencing, feeling depressed and being suicidal and having anxiety attacks.
Well, and the world was also at war. We just entered the war, so the vibes,
that's right.
The vibes were dark then, for sure.
It really was a crazy time. It was a crazy time. And then this is like 9/11 was still like a strange concept.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a lot of interesting things at that time.
Yeah, it really is. That's the music fucking saved me from myself during that time, for sure.
100%.
So you're working on the second one, volume 2. Where do you want to take this? Do you want to turn this into like a whole series? Do you want to start more broad and then kind of narrow in depending on what people seem to gravitate towards, and do other books on, breakouts of topics that you discuss but don't go into great detail? Well, like, what's your plan? What are you trying to do with Say the Quiet Part Out Loud as a whole?
Yeah, as a whole, I wanted it to be a 3-part series. So the second one, a funny thing has recently happened where the manager of All Time Low, Say Anything, All American Reject, he found me on TikTok. And
amazing.
So
Thank you, social media.
I'm like, that's why I say my life is getting so weird. So I actually may have an interview with All Time Low probably in the near future, possibly. So I'm actually going to use him as like a huge resource. I just did not expect that. But so I want to do it was always going to be a 3-part series, where part 2 is going to focus more on bands like All Time Low, and kind of like around the time where emo was starting to kind of peak, but there were still these other interesting bands that were happening, like on MySpace, like that whole kind of wave. And then, strangely enough, part 3, I would like to just focus on Midwest emo.
Yeah.
Just like the full history of Midwest emo, because I just find that really interesting. But that's the plan. And then just continue to write more books about not just emo music, just like alternative music, alternative culture, and just kind of really go from there.
No, it's really funny. Again, you unintentionally became the damn expert. And now there's going to be bands who are going to be like, well, hey, we want someone to tell our story. You're already telling our story. I don't know. It's just, it's very funny how when you start doing something that you're passionate about, how quickly it can turn into some whole other thing that you weren't anticipating.
Yeah, because like I never anticipated it. Like even I'm so. By the way, thank you for the opportunity to do this. Like this is not.
Thank you for
When you
coming
hit
on.
me
Are you
up,
kidding me on this ridiculous show? Thank you for coming on here.
no, this is awesome. Like I was very excited when you hit me up. I'm like, I didn't. Again, I didn't expect any of this. Like this is genuinely is not something I anticipated. Because like, as you know, again, being an artist, you're just doing the thing that you always have done.
Right.
Like I've always been writing it. With you, probably making music. You know what I mean? So
It's what we have to do. We have
it's
to
what
do
we
it.
have to do.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not thinking like, oh, it's going to lead to this and this. I'm not thinking any of that. I'm just doing what I've been doing, and this one just kind of it just took off. So.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And it's important, like I was saying, it's the documentation alone. This shit needs to be documented. Why there aren't more things about it? And to be honest, like when I think of the people that could document it, yeah, they could get some asshole writer who wrote a bunch of like New York Times bestsellers. I don't want that guy writing the book on this music. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
I want somebody who listened to this shit, who lived and breathed this shit. That's the kind of person I want writing the book on this stuff.
Well, that's what made it so incredibly awesome. It's like I really genuinely took the DIY approach. Like I literally released self-published this book, and when I saw it number one on the on Amazon in the punk rock category, I was blown away. I'm like, I'm beating out these much bigger, fancy writers. I'm just some kid who like loves this music, and suddenly I have a number one book. Like I was literally just blown away. I still am. I'm just like, I don't know how this is even happening, but I am so grateful and kind of in shock.
Well, it's you just do what you do. You do what you do, and you try and see how often you can really enjoy what you're doing. It's hard in this life. It's hard to do that, but you find that thing and you just run with it. I think there's also, it sounds like there was a lot of like universal signs that all the things just kind of converged at the perfect time, or the planets aligned for you. And you just ran with it, and it worked.
Yeah. Because this creative life, it can be being an artist is someone who has a high tolerance for a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yes, that's a very nice way of putting it.
It's like things are either like really awesome and incredible, and you're on top of the world, or you're just like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Where is this going?
Well, our purpose, I used to hate that. I used to hate that aspect of this shit, and it used to piss me off a lot. And at some point, I just became okay with the fact that, like, that's how I get the inspiration. I have to hit the valley so I can want to go to the peak, and then I have to fall from the peak into the valley so I can get back up to the peak. That's just how we do. Like, how do you remain inspired if everything's okay?
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. And it's one of those things where it's like either that's your personality or it's not. Because I've become comfortable in the chaos that is being an artist or being a creative person. I do so much better in this kind of environment than punching in and punching out somewhere. Like for me, like everyone is different, but for me, I'm like, I actually kind of like the chaos in some ways. So
yeah, no, for sure. For sure. There's a part of me that always enjoyed that about events too. Events it never goes according to plan. There's always some chaos.
Oh yeah. But, I used to produce shows, so I know.
Oh, you get it. Yeah, you get it. It's always there's always herding cats. It's always craziness. You're always short on time and money somehow. But there's a piece of me that I love the chaos. So I would continue to do it. And honestly, when I first moved up here, I quickly learned that by doing that kind of work, I could see a lot of shows that I wouldn't get to normally see. And there was this venue that they opened in Queens. It's like a former tennis world championship. It's called Forest Hills. It's this epic venue. The first summer they had it open, Brand New played, and it was crazy. There was like nobody there. It was a relatively empty show. It's also a smaller venue, and it was just one of those things where I didn't even know they were coming. I was working at that venue. I wasn't even paying attention to who was playing because most of the time it was bands I didn't give a shit about. And that weekend I show up and I'm like, oh, all right. That's legit.
Pretty awesome. Yeah.
That's
wild.
This was like 2017, 2016, maybe, or maybe even 2015. It was a while ago. But that's one of the interesting things about doing shows up here is like occasionally, like the guitar player from Poison the Well used to do events like as a production guy. So I've worked events with the guitar player from Poison the Well, Ryan.
Wild.
It's hilarious.
That's
Super
wild.
random. There was another thing like one of my buddies told me, he was like, this is the guitar player from Poison the Well. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. But I didn't say anything because I was like, we're here doing work. And then he came down to, he and my friend were driving a bunch of gear to a band, maybe Sleigh Bells, because he plays guitar for Sleigh Bells too. And they stayed with me when I lived in Nashville. And they got really wasted and I started giving him shit about You Come Before You. Like I was just like finding creative ways to like insert that into the conversation until he picked up. He's like, fuck you. I see what you're doing. Fuck you.
I see where you're going.
But I never wanted to pick his brain, but I'm sure like that for me, it's the New York era of those bands. Like the early 2000s New York, the Glassjaws, the Thursdays, the Taking Back Sundays. For me, those are the bands. When I think about the records that really got me into that music, it was the early 2000s, Long Island, New York, New Jersey.
Such an important scene. Like,
it's crazy to think all the fucking bands and all the legendary records that came out of that area from the tri-state area.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Brand New Thursday, My Tail, Taking Back Sunday. Like it's insane the amount of talent that happened at the same time. It's just one of those lightning in the bottle kind of moments where
for sure
everything just fell in place.
I wish I had been old enough to be working events at that time. You know what I mean? Like that's like my biggest regret. And whenever a band that I would love from that era would do like a reunion show or play just like a one-off show in New York, I would try my hardest to like either work or have my buddy who was working get me in. But I still need to check off a few bands from the list. But that's why I'm pretty pleased that they're all touring again. It's been amazing over the past 10 years to watch all these bands who are like, we're done with this forever. They're not. They're coming back.
And it's crazy. It's crazy that they all have released, or a lot of them have released new records like in the same year, which I'm just like, is there like some secret emo meeting happening where it's just like, okay, we're all going to just drop albums the same year and just take over the world again? Like,
well, and you might have more insight into this, but they probably got sick of each other. And it took like 10 years of being away from each other to be like, you know what, whatever petty problems we had, let's put those aside and make some money, play these shows and have a good time. It can't, whatever we bickered about then cannot be worth us not doing this.
Not doing this. Yeah. And some of these bands, you know, like with Mike Helm, I feel like they not only do I feel like they genuinely want to play, but I feel like they still have some more to say.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
They don't strike me as a band that's interested in like, you know, let's just profit off pure nostalgia. It seems like they still have some things left to say. I'd argue they may be actually more relevant now, even more than they were back then in some ways.
Well, because what they were saying back then, what most of the bands of that time were saying back then was premonition shit. It was pointing us where we were going, and here we are. We ended up exactly where the all of the misanthropic message of that era of music were exactly where we were supposed to be. It's exactly where they said we were going to be.
Yeah. I'm sure they look back and they're like, we told you we were right.
Well, but this is what trips me out. Is it a snake eating its own tail? Like, were they explaining the pitfalls of the emotional existence and where that can lead that led us there? Or were we headed there anyway and they were just reporting on it? Is something that always trips me out. Because again, it is not lost on me that our generation, as fundamentally affected by those lyrics as we were, we became adults. who folded those lyrics into the essence of our being, and the essence of our being is now being responsible for what's going on. We're inheriting this. So
Oh, we are, yeah, definitely. Damn, I didn't think about it like that.
it's just there's no real answer. It's just something I've always I know how much this shit meant to me. I know what those words, the words that were sung, I know what they did to my brain, and I know I'm not alone. And I don't know. It's an interesting mind exercise to get lost in. But yeah, I regret that I was living in Nebraska during that time. However, I was super lucky because there was one club in Nebraska, in Lincoln, the city that I lived in. It was called Knickerbockers. And it was like the place where everybody played. And even bands before they got famous, this is where they played. So when Thursday, Death by Audio, any of those bands, if they happened to come through Nebraska, they were coming to this show or this venue, and it was like 300 people. Anywhere in that venue, you could touch the person. I'm so happy that I was cognizant enough as a kid to capture those shows, because this was like when it was happening. Thursday had just released the second record. Full Collapse. There you go. They had just released. It was like the peak of what they were doing, and they were coming through. Lincoln's like the only place for bands to stop. Lincoln or Omaha, between Kansas City and Denver. Really, it's like the only city. But I don't know. Were you going to these shows? Because they had to have been coming through Chicago. Like, were you trying to go to these shows as a teen, or did you not even know they were on the radar?
So I wish I'm originally from Michigan. So like my teenage years was spent in Michigan.
Yeah.
And I had a very chaotic teenage experience. So actually, I was homeless a lot of the time during that period. Yeah, like it was. That's why I said it music saved me in so many ways, which is a whole different conversation. But I was fortunate to see Fall Out Boy and Gym Class Heroes randomly, because my sister randomly won tickets, and so I saw that, and I mean it's so cliche, like a religious experience, but like it was everything I'd ever hoped in my life. Like at the peak,
peak Fall Out Boy.
It was peak Fall Out Boy. This is like during the time where they had like the beef with the Killers, and they would do a cover of Mr. Brightside.
Oh wow!
Just kind of like mocking the Killers. It was just peak everything.
I love how petty that is.
It was so petty and so beautiful at the same time. Because I really didn't know why they hated each other until I started doing more research. I was like, oh, this is where this came from. But yeah, Fall Out Boy was just like a life-changing thing. And then I saw Chiodos.
Oh wow!
I saw Chiodos.
Yeah, Godfathers.
This was so I had never heard of them at that time. They opened up for Linkin Park. I was going to see Linkin Park.
Hell yeah!
And which was amazing.
That's an amazing show. That's an amazing show.
Yeah, it's just like Chester's voice is just like insane.
Next world.
And so they had this opening band, and they're like, "Oh, we are Chiodos, whatever." And when I tell you, my jaw dropped on the floor. I was just like, "Who is this band? Why haven't I ever heard of them? They're from Michigan. What is happening?" And I was like obsessed. To this day, All Wells That Ends Well is like one of my favorite albums of all time. Like I love that album so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be in part 2. I'm going to definitely be writing about Chiodos.
Oh, they have to be. Yeah, they have to be.
Yeah.
It's just, again, also really funny to me how people want to neglect the impact. Like for me, it's impossible to look at metalcore and subsequently any modern metal without listening to the influence that these bands had on the metalcore bands.
Thank you.
Especially the metalheads, they do not want to hear that, but they're fucking morons because it's undeniable at this point.
They despise that. I don't know if you remember seeing certain old videos of like metalheads, just like not all metalheads, but so many of them completely hated those bands. All of those bands. Like I remember there's a video of I forget where Mike Hill was playing, but there's like all these metalheads just like throwing all this shit at them. I'm like, I never understood the hate for it from metal people. I'm just like, we're kind of part of the same family in some ways. Like, I don't understand. Anyway.
Well, again, you put a magnifier on anything, you'll find some shit you don't like. And the metal scene, for sure. They're also the kind of people that will get stuck in subgenres, arguments about subgenres that will last for lifetimes. And I just don't have the patience for it. It's
crazy. They're very purists, which is
it's very strange. It's very strange. People who are so anti-establishment are so establishment about their fucking genres.
That's the irony of it. I'm just like, aren't you guys like defeating the purpose?
Never made sense to me. It's never made sense to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's really crazy.
But yeah, I'm super happy to see this shit cycling back. I'm super happy to see a lot of these bands like legitimately be able to launch I think we're getting like 20-year anniversary of every great record. You know, like every band as their seminal record hits the 20, we're getting like at least one tour, if not some new music or continued touring.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
When we were Young Fest this year, they're doing a thing. I don't know if you saw that, where it's like the bands are playing one of their classic albums, like in
the entirety. Genius.
Yeah.
That's genius.
Mike Hillman's playing the Black Parade. Dashboard is playing, I forget which record. Taking Back Sunday's playing Kill All Your Friends. Like, it's gonna, like, me and my friend, we're definitely going. We bought tickets immediately.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't get canceled this time.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Even though it lasted all of this, I'm like, in some ways, it kind of was a blessing in disguise. But
yeah, that's. I mean, and just honestly, like, you'll never see that again. Not only all of those bands doing it, but those bands will never do that again. That's you can't miss that.
Yeah.
Like, very honestly, you wrote the book on this shit, so you have to be there. It's like a legal requirement.
Literally.
You need to be there documenting it.
Pretty much.
Just so you can mention it in a future book. Well, that is super exciting. All this is super cool. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about your favorite genre of music. I guess if we did another one of these, I'd want to maybe see if we could unpack a story, your favorite story, but again, without revealing too much so that it still incentivizes people to go read the book. But I want you to think about that for the next time we do this. Maybe we do it again when Say the Choir Part Out Loud 2, Volume 2 comes out. We can do another podcast episode on that. That'd be amazing. And then we can pick a story, and we can you can take us down the rabbit hole on it.
Absolutely. Very down for that.
Love that. All right. Thank you so much again. We're going to close out here. People, check out the Patreon, check out the YouTube, check out MyEmoDiaries. And I'm going to put the link tree in the bio here, but there's so many good quality links for you to check out, including the YouTube and the music. I just discovered your YouTube today. So everyone just dig in. There's tons of content to keep you interested in just about anything alternative music related you could think of.
Right on.
But all right, I'm going to play the outro and then we're out of here. Stay on afterward.
Okay.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva.
That's obnoxious.
Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva.
Literally no one cares.
For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod.
When will this end?
Thank you for listening. Now get back to work.
Move it along, buddy.